Flight 370.
MH Flight 370.
Malaysia Airlines Flight 370.
MH-370 was a flight operated by Malaysia Airlines from Kuala Lumpur International Airport to Beijing Capital International Airport on March 8, 2014. The crew on board were, as listed but not limited to, Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah, who was born in Penang and had a wife and 2 children, First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, whose final words were, "Alright, good night." In total, there were 227 passengers and 12 crew on board. At 1:22, MYT MH-370 went dark on ATC radar, and at 2:22, radar contact was lost on military systems, with the flight officially disappearing. That morning, media companies got wind of the mystery that unfolded, and it had taken the world by storm. A massive multinational search effort for the aircraft began to search for the plane, which seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth. This documentary will explore how these mysterious and tragic events unfolded, 6 theories behind what happened, and more. Captain Zaharie was born on July 31st, 1961, in Penang, Malaysia. Captain Zaharie was a Boeing 777 captain for a total of 16 years and had accumulated a total of 8,659 flight hours. He was also a type rating instructor and a type rating examiner on the 777. According to reports by his sister Zaharie Shah about their childhood, "We were brought up in a very decent family, a simple village boy from poor beginnings, and he became a commercial pilot." She also stated during the same report that he had no money problems, no mental health problems, no marriage problems, no drug or alcohol problems, and no history of odd behavior. In addition to Zaharie Shah's report, lead investigator of MH370 would also dismiss the pilot suicide theory in July 2018 when he stated, "We have examined the pilot and the first officer, and we are quite satisfied with their background, with their training, with their mental health. We are not of the opinion that it could have been an event committed by the pilot." The friends of Zaharie Shah would like to argue otherwise, claiming Captain Zaharie was quoted as lonely and sad and clinically depressed, as reported by The Atlantic. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid had been with Malaysia Airlines since 2007 and was 26 years old when MH370 went missing. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid was the last person to communicate with the rest of the world on MH370. His final words were, "Alright, good night." Unlike Captain Zaharie, Fariq wouldn't face the same degree of scrutiny that Zaharie was facing after the disappearance of Flight 370. The 27-year-old Malaysian pilot was, as Richard Quest quoted, "I was more concerned, frankly, that we had a relatively inexperienced first officer doing the landing with CNN sitting in the back filming." He also would go on to say things about Malaysia Airlines, the airline operating Flight MH370. Quest would say, "Malaysia Airlines is a robust airline. It's been around for many years. It has an excellent reputation, both for service and for safety." MH370 was supposed to be a regularly scheduled flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing at 22:50 MYT or 10:50 p.m. On March 7th, Captain Zaharie signed in for duty. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid would sign in at 23:15 or 11:15 p.m. At 0000 or 12 a.m. MYT, MH370's SDU or satellite data unit is logged onto the Inmarsat network, which allows for voice and data communications to be relayed to and from the cockpit and other systems on the aircraft, including the location of the plane. At 0:27 or 12:27 a.m., MH370 was granted clearance to push back from Gate C1. MH370 was officially granted takeoff clearance at runway 32 right from Kuala Lumpur at 0:40:37 or about 12:40 a.m. This would mark the start of this fateful flight. MH370 began its scheduled flight right after takeoff from runway 32 right, with MH370 getting clearance to climb to flight level 180 and head to waypoint Zaharie at 04253. If you don't know, waypoints are kind of like highway markers in the sky that act as GPS checkpoints to the final location. At 04639, MH370 was transferred from the airport's ATC to Lumpur Radar ATC based at Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center. At 101, MH370 climbed to and reached flight level 350. At 107, the final ACARS data transmission was made. The aircraft communications addressing and reporting system essentially functions as a text messaging system between the aircraft and the ground. At 119, KLACC tells MH370 to contact Ho Chi Minh ACC or HCMACC as MH370 passes waypoint Zaharie. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid responds with, "Alright, good night." At 121, MH370 officially disappears from KLCC's radar and is still tracked by Malaysian military radar, with MH370 turning left to the southwest. At 139, HCMACC says that MH370 disappeared at waypoint Betod. At 152, the phone of First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid had pinged off a cell tower below the aircraft near the southern end of Penang Island, where MH370 then turned northwest near the Strait of Malacca. At 222, MH370 disappeared from Malaysian military radar at about 200 nautical miles or 370 kilometers to the northwest of Penang. The last recorded position of MH370 was at 2:35 at position 14 degrees 54 minutes 0 seconds north, 109 degrees 15 minutes 0 degrees east, or near North Vietnam. The Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center, or ARCC, officially launched the search and rescue effort to find the missing aircraft on March 8, 2014, and hopefully bring some closure to the families of the victims. The search efforts for the missing flight MH370 started in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. The US NTSB sends a team to investigate the mystery along with the ATSB. Around this time, Inmarsat provides the known data from MH370 to the investigation teams. By March 24th, 2014, the families of victims who were lost on MH370 started demanding the authorities for answers on what happened to this mysterious flight. This is also along with a text message the families of the victims received. We have to assume beyond all reasonable doubt that MH370 has been lost and none of those on board survived. On June 26, 2014, the first of many theories as to what happened to the missing plane surfaced, with the ATSB suspecting the flight crew became incapacitated after a catastrophic event such as a rapid depressurization. Thus, they assume the flight flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. On the 28th of January 2015, the government of Malaysia declared that the missing flight was an accident and all on board had perished. This comes 327 days after the flight went missing on the night of March 8th. The conclusion stems from the aircraft running out of fuel in the search area in the southern Indian Ocean. By the 23rd of July 2015, the Chief Commissioner of the ATSB states that MH370 will be found within the next year. At this time, 21,000 of the 46,332 square mile search area had been searched. On the 5th of August 2015, a piece of a plane wing was said to have been discovered on Réunion, a French island in the southern Indian Ocean. This claim was made by Najib Razak, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. France, Australia, and the US did not confirm the legitimacy of this statement. In March 2016, more debris surfaced in Mozambique, with them saying it was highly likely to have come from MH370. These pieces have later been confirmed to have been panels from a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777. In October 2016, a piece of a wing flap was found on Mauritius. Officials in Australia and Malaysia have confirmed that this piece was from MH370. The first search for the missing aircraft would finally come to a closure in January 2017, after 120,000 square kilometers had been searched and over 2.5 years spent to hopefully find the missing plane and bring closure to the families. As new information surfaced during the investigations of this mysterious aircraft, new suspicions and theories as to what happened began to emerge. The first of many theories was established by the ATSB, suspecting that an event similar to a depressurization had caused the incapacitation of the flight crew and those on board, thus resulting in the plane flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and then crashing into the Indian Ocean. The most popular theory that people accept stems from evidence investigators found in Captain Zaharie's own house. They discovered a flight path on Captain Zaharie's flight sim that started in Malaysia and followed almost the same known flight path of MH370. The theory assumes Captain Zaharie had locked First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid out of the cockpit. He would then proceed to disable the SDU, or a satellite data unit, along with any outside communication systems on board the flight. After the flight would essentially disappear from the rest of the world, Zaharie would depressurize the plane while wearing his oxygen mask, and the other passengers and crew would die from hypoxia. He would then fly between Thailand and Malaysia to avoid raising suspicions of the militaries. After that, he would turn south over the Indian Ocean, where the aircraft would run out of fuel and disappear forever. The second theory is a highly improbable but possible pilot hijacking by Captain Zaharie or First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid. This theory would include the idea that the pilot would want to land somewhere and survive the whole incident. This theory is highly improbable because both the first officer and captain had normal relations with friends and family before the flight, which would lead to thoughts of a hijacking between them to be improbable. Tying into this theory, there is another theory that involves a passenger or member of the cabin crew hijacking the aircraft. This idea stems from a post-9/11 world, and that security won't always prevent someone dangerous, such as a terrorist, from boarding a flight. Though, like the pilot hijacking theory, there is evidence to disprove it, the cabin crew all had families of their own, which would likely remove suspicion from them. Then there were also a couple of Iranian passengers who stole passports from an Italian and Austrian, but they are assumed to have been illegal immigrants trying to get to Western countries. Another theory that is proposed is a cyber terrorism hijacking, which delves into the realm of conspiracy theories. This theory involves an uninterruptible autopilot, which allows for the remote takeover of the aircraft. Designed by Boeing, this feature was patented back in 2003 in the case of a possible hijacking. This system could either be activated by the pilots or remotely by the government or airline. However, this theory would be heavily disproven when information surfaced from Boeing confirming that this new system had not been implemented in any of their aircrafts. There is also a proposed theory about the flight being seized by a stowaway in the aircraft. Philip Baum believes that this theory could be the most likely idea of what happened other than the pilot suicide theory. The theory is developed from the avionics compartment, which has a hatch just behind the flight deck door. In this area, the stowaway would have access to the aircraft's transponder, which they then could disable to limit information between the aircraft and the world. However, the probability of this scenario happening is quite low. They would have had to enter the aircraft before the flight crews had entered it, which would have been nearly impossible for any single person to do.